Okay, Jenny and Dan are now going to talk about the Alumni Admission program.
Cool. So now that we're online on video, so I wanted to do some updates about the Alumni Admission program. Some of you might have already been hearing this, but I want to formally introduce the whole staff. So we're really excited that Sam has her new role as Gary's assistant, and as such, she's not going to be working with the AAP anymore. She's still going to help manage applicant receptions and congrat receptions with me, but the AAP piece is not Sam's purview. So we're moving to a different structure. So I'm still in charge of the program, and I'll do the whole SAIL program updates. We're really excited to be rolling out a Slate alumni portal, which Dan will talk more about in a little bit. So excited! He's done an incredible amount of work, and as with everything else he's done such a great job with it.
On this one?
Only one of us has gotten a full answer. But so we'll unveil more what the Slate portal looks like. We're hoping that alums can sign up for college fairs through there. There will still be some management pieces that will be hand managed. But basically we're moving to a regional structure. So I'll be sending, I'll be coming up with the committees and sending some holistic updates. But AOs will be working with their travel partner on the operation team to manage their own committees. So you will be, and I'm going to release, once we fine tune things, I'm going to release kind of like a timeline and who does what at what time of the year to everyone, so you have a good idea of what to expect coming down the line. But basically, AOs are going to be working with AAAs to make sure that college fairs in their regions are covered, to make sure that alums have updated information. So if ever alums like, I don't get why this policy change happened, this is a good place to talk to the AO about it. So I'm going to be sending a message to the whole AAP at the beginning of next week, kind of rolling out what this new management structure looks like. And once the AOs see that message, I think that AOs, you've all been in touch with your AAP committee, so they should know who you are. But then I'll tap you to send an email to your committee and chair people, and also copy your operations teammate with you to make sure that the committee is introduced to the pair of folks who are going to be working with them. And what am I going to say? So, and then you guys, just like you work with travel to make sure that high school visits are confirmed and your travel is confirmed, you're going to be working together as a team to make sure that college fairs and interviews are confirmed. We are going to upload to Slate some training videos for alums to know how to use the Slate portal, and also how to interview and how to do college fairs. But one piece I want to let the AOs know is, and part of the role with being a regional manager, and then also that we can have delivered through Slate, and you can get emails through Slate, all of the alums, which is really exciting. You're going to be in touch with your committees a lot more than you probably have been in the past. So similar to our high school visits, there's going to be a message that goes out to alums from you as their regional saying hey, ED decisions were released a week ago. Check your portal to see if you want to see who deposited from your region. Same thing when March and in January around kind of the app deadline pieces. I'm going to be following up with everyone once we have our committees finalized. We're importing them all into Slate now. But I wanted all staff members to know that it is absolutely an expectation that if you can't physically meet with your AAP members when you're traveling, that you reach out to them and offer to schedule a phone call with them at the beginning of September or late August. It's just not acceptable for you to never contact your committee at the beginning of the travel season because we have a lot of what's new at Colgate. And they're going to be, they do 150, 250 college fairs for us a year. Like, they are on the front lines in their communities. And some of them have been graduating for 20 or 30 years, like, and they need you to tell them what's new and communicate with them about ED and other exciting things. So what you can do now, I said that we don't have the committees completely finalized yet, but AOs, I'd like you tomorrow and Monday to look at your travel schedules and identify where can I meet with people in my committee, where can I not meet with people in committee, and at least have that sketched out so that when you do get in touch with them next week or the week after, that you know exactly already where you can plug in AAP contacts and information. So next week we are going to have a lot of action steps for everyone about the AAP because things are just a little bit later this year with the portal and my travel and poor Lynn having to jump into more of the AAP than she realized. But so I wanted to also let you know that we're going to be releasing this Friday or Monday like action steps for everyone on how we're going to roll out AAP stuff. Any questions on that bit before Dan shows us the fancy new portal? Yes.
So thinking about these expectations, phone calls, should we be think about like any kind of like training meeting, or is it just like these are the updates, this is what it is, like get people in the room and like walk through things? What is the expectation there, thought process there?
Yeah. So usually it's we want to train them when we can, but it's kind of hard to get volunteers to come to like a boring training meeting. So the best
they can be fun.
They can. But the best way to train with an AP member is to have them join you for college fairs when you're covering one, so they can see you in action. So also look now and see which college fairs you're allowed to have alumni at, and see if you want to have another staff member with you. I don't know why my first year I didn't have an AAP member with me at Greenwich High School College Fair, because it was horrible alone. It can be really, really nice to have another person, and then they also get to be trained. Did you have anything you wanted to add about training meetings?
No, I think it's going to be really important whenever you can to do a personalized meeting with the alums. As Dan will talk about, I think the role of the chairperson is changing drastically in a self-service module of the AAP portal. So we will actually be reevaluating even the need for a chairperson. But I do think that the program's changing. Face-to-face conversations are always ideal. And I think everyone can benefit from those conversations. So the expectation always first is meet in person. Decide, see when you can in your schedule what day. People's lives are busy. If you set something up, there is money in the travel budget for you to meet with the AAP members. It can be for coffee, for a happy hour. It can be for dinner. We just try to have you be thoughtful if the alums pick the restaurant and then you're covering the bill, to sort of have an expectation of how much it's going to be. Or be part of that conversation about where you meet with them. But I do think in a lot of years there haven't been a lot of things different at Colgate, and I think this is a year where there's a lot of momentum on campus. It's our bicentennial. Our program itself is changing, and I think any year this is going to be critical to do as much face time as you can.
Right. It's also a really good way to know like what's happening in your region, because oftentimes these people are really critical parts of their community. So I would say like when I've met with AAP members, it's usually been like chit chat that they want to know what's new at Colgate, so they'll usually ask you. But make sure you have like a moment during your meeting where you're talking about some of these new changes, and like, yeah, I also want to meet you because I wanted to let you know like all these exciting things that are happening on campus, but also letting them know that they can call you, because Sam won't be there to have them call for whatever they need anymore. So like she'll transfer them to you guys. So let them know also that you're the person on the other end of the line that they're going to get when they're calling about like how do I check and make sure that like the kid that I interviewed applied, and like what happened with kids from my region this year, exactly how many deposits do we have from Chicago, and all that stuff.
But also too, I think as you develop the personal relationships with your committee, it helps you understand better how you can use them and how they can support the work that you do. So, there's so many benefits to the training, but there's times when I see an alum that you're like, oh, this would be great. I feel like they could manage X, Y, Z, or maybe this is someone I could have visit some of my charter schools, you know, because you understand what their perspective is, their, you know, and what they feel most comfortable representing about Colgate. And so that helps as we're going to be involved a little bit more regionally with trying to manage some scheduling challenges we have, or if we have an interview at the last minute we need to have covered. If you know who your members are, then it helps you find a solution more readily.
So we will be moving towards having college fairs, having them self-select which college fairs they would like to cover through Slate. That said, you know, there are always fairs that we'll have to round and see. We don't have coverage yet. So I wanted Dan to show you guys.
Do we have like?
Yeah, over here.
Oh.
Actually, you can read it. It's like
Okay, so I think the best way to do this is I will show you how to find the alumni in Slate. So the structure of this is that each AAP member now exists in Slate as a record. So they exist as an AAP, as part of our alumni data set in Slate, just like students are our prospects data set, counselors are our organizations contacts data set. Their screens are not as robust. We don't do like ping data and all of that on the alums. But all of the alum data sort of feeds into this portal, which as you'll see is still very much a work in progress. Even at the beginning of this week, we actually decided to scrub everything that we had done to that point and start over. It's been a very interesting and fun learning experience. So what I'll do is I'll show you what the alumni record looks like, and then we'll go in and impersonate an alum to see what they will see and what they currently would see in their portal. And then we'll talk about some of the logistical changes, some of the things that they may have been used to that will be changing as far as what things they'll be prompted to cover. As both Lynn and Jenny mentioned, the traditional idea of the committee and the chairperson is changing quite a bit. With self-service, we obviously don't need that middleman step anymore, right? So we don't need someone to go out and try to rally the troops, except in the case where we have a fair coming up and we still don't have any volunteers, right? So that's where the operations team, the AO, will need to partner to reach out via Slate to a specific group. The nice thing about how we've organized all of this is it's a structure that you're all familiar with. We're using EPS. So the EPS area, so each alum, based on their address, will have an EPS region. One of the things that we did need to change is that an alum will only have one EPS region. So what they will see as we get into this, it basically looks for a match on the EPS and on the applicant and the EPS on the alum. So there will be some areas where we've seen that people would used to cover multiple areas. What they'll see in Slate is actually going to be just the students from their EPS. So that will cause some questions, that will cause some concerns, but it was a necessity out of the way that the system was set up. So.
Can I just?
Yeah.
So when Dan explained this to me the other day, I sort of had to have that moment of like, okay, walk me through this and explain what it means.
Yeah.
So I'll use it as like an example for one of my regions, and I can look at Drew and think the same thing for the boroughs. So the borough, I'll use Drew. So the boroughs in New York City, there's actually 5. I think there's 5 boroughs, but I think it's actually 5 EPS codes as well, or maybe more, 7?
So it's like 9, yeah.
Okay. So who's your chair, who's the? Dana. So I'm gonna assume maybe does Dana live in Manhattan?
Manhattan.
Okay, so Dana's only gonna see the volunteers that live in Manhattan and would only see the applicants that live in Manhattan. And so if somebody lives in Queens, depending on Northwest Queens, or I think Queens is broken up,
Yeah.
but they'll only see the people that actually are in, like in terms of their committee, that are actually in their
Right.
actual EPS code.
And that's why sort of the chairperson role is
And
kind of diminishing, just because when we reach out for coverage, we'll know, or we'll need to get familiar with, if we're desperate for coverage for a fair in Manhattan, we'll want to query all of the available alums in the surrounding EPS regions. So it will be a little bit of looking at the EPS maps and getting familiar with those territories. So we're sort of going to build a committee when we need it to identify the population that we want to look at. The benefit to this structure, really, we sort of needed to prioritize what were the functions of the AAP that were most important. And for us, it's college fairs. Most of the schools using the portals are actually doing it for interviews, and we will be able to do that as well. But for us, the priority is making sure that the alums see the fairs that they're going to work with. So what we didn't want to have happen was the alums to only see college fairs that were happening in their EPS regions. Particularly with the way that club codes were and EPS regions, the boundaries were not the same, and they were sort of artificial boundaries. So we did decide that we would display events coming up within a 50-mile radius of the volunteer. So in most areas, 50 miles is pretty reasonable. In New York City, probably not. They will still see those as options for them to cover. They just don't sign up for it, right? If you can't get to something that's 49 miles away, you don't volunteer for it. So that's a little bit of a change from what they've seen in the past. I think some of the alums who are very familiar with the old way may have some problems with that, but I think, for most people, the majority, the self-service is going to be actually significantly easy for them. So if you see something, it doesn't mean we're expecting you to cover a fair that's 50 miles away. But if you'd like to, or if it's on your way home from work, by all means sign up for it. So we thought that a 50-mile radius was really a good range. It worked universally, because whatever we pick for our range has to work universally, has to work across the country. What we were having with the EPS is a volunteer who was in the southwest corner of Arizona, but because of the way that the previous committees were aligned, we were needing to show them something in the very far northeast corner of Arizona. So the 50-mile radius just seemed like the most manageable way to set that up. So those are some of the bigger changes in that for what they will see for events, they'll see any event. The requirements for the events to show up in the portal are that it be a fair that's already confirmed, and that the user number 1, is alumni representative. So that works as it has in the past. That's the trigger that will display the fair in the portal for the alum. At which time, can take a look at this. So let's first do an alumni record. So Jenny, you mentioned Claudia. So you can search for the alums, just like, what's her name?
Steph's Branch, the first one.
Yeah. So you can search for the alums just like you would a student or a guidance counselor or anything like that. You'll see it has their hometown as well as their class year shown in their little preview here. And then you'll want to obviously choose the one that's the alumni volunteer. So you'll see the record looks sort of similar to what the student records see. They have an EPS code that's assigned based on the address that they've given us. This is the address that we're going to use for them. So this software, or Slate, isn't interfacing with Razor's Edge, which is the alumni product. We're maintaining our own alumni list so that we can get up-to-date info every year. We're not waiting for them to update alumni and then trickle over to us. So we are going to put the expectation on our alumni volunteers that if they do have a change in address or anything like that, that they will let us know. There is a form directly in the portal that will allow them to give us updates at any time. They will authenticate into the portal via a username and a password that we'll generate for them. The username will be right on their homepage here. It's just going to be the email that they've given us. And then they'll get a password in the same way that our applicants do for their portal. So they'll get a temporary PIN number, they'll create a password, things like that. Which they may not remember and will need to reset their accounts.
I was going to say.
The password reset.
Video number 1.
Yes. The timeline will work similar to how it does for our records, so you'll be able to track emails that have gone out to the alums and things like that, as long as the email is sent via Slate.
Next week.
You can also just click their email address and send a correspondence, just like you know. If you ever need to upload a material about someone, we could theoretically. And then their alumni details just sort of identifies their role, which is just really for our records at this point, as well as the GP records with EPS. Let's take a look at the portal.
Can I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
So it looks like there's an active field.
Yes.
So is the idea if a member goes inactive, that will be populated?
Exactly, yeah. So all of those fields we can control. So if when we are seeking out our renewals, what we'll actually do this year into the summer is send that email via Slate, and it'll be a Slate form that they'll fill out. And if they respond on that form that they're no longer interested, that will automatically roll them to inactive. So we're not necessarily going to purge the alumni data set now that it's built, but they will be able to self-select out. We also will have so if you, this isn't public facing or anything like that, but as we're doing recruitment, we'll also have a new alumni volunteer form. So that we can put this in, if we learn about someone, this will also be a very similar form to what they see in their portal.
Okay.
And that would make them active.
Gotcha. Second question, where did we get the info that we loaded in? Was it from our own spreadsheets or whatever?
It is, yeah. So the forms, or the data that we've loaded in came from the renewal process from this previous year.
Okay.
So we reached out, Jenny, Sam, did a ton of work to reach out, solicit that new information into a Google form, which we just converted and brought into Excel. So,
Gotcha.
so that data didn't come from the alumni records or anything like that. That is all coming from. The idea here is that we don't want to rely on old addresses. If they're helping us out, we can expect them, or at least have that reasonable expectation that they'll keep us updated.
Okay, now I'm gonna ask, you're gonna hate me.
That's fine.
So the one thing that the alumni database has, which is nice, is things like major when they were on campus, affiliations on campus when they were here, and I think relatively up-to-date employment information.
Yep.
Right?
You're exactly right. So we had a meeting last week with Lindsay and the alumni team to talk about the development of their new CRM, Razor's Edge. We made the intentional decision not to bring a lot of alumni records into Slate. Some schools actually bring in their entire alumni database into Slate. And one school in particular did that poorly and crashed the whole system.
Who is it?
Brown, actually.
Brown!
Yeah, so it was funny, we were at the Slate conference, I was like, that's not gonna work going into next year, and she's like, I know, but I'm leaving today, it was trying to stay at Brown, so. She was great. So what we will have, and this is something that they're actually setting up, so the alumni, the Razor's Edge project, basically right now, they have turned off edit access to the alumni database and banner. So no one anywhere on campus can update alumni banner. It's all part of a decently well-timed rollout of Razor's Edge. At this point, we've requested accounts for myself, Sue, and Sam, for Gary's needs and things like that. And basically, we want to demo this and see what it looks like. But we can have view access to Razor's Edge to look at the entire alumni database, which will have education history, which is their majors here. I don't know how much employment history we would see. We certainly wouldn't see like giving history or anything like that.
Yeah.
But we will be able to look into the alumni database as Razor's Edge accounts. But that's why we've kept those separate.
Mm-hmm.
That will be updated as often as possible, but we don't have a formal integration of the alumni database. So we're obviously sending student records and LPR stuff over to that database, and I will show you a piece about that in a second. But as far as looking at alumni stuff, as far as what they did here, what their current job is, we will answer that. So.
Okay.
What did you use that for?
What, did I?
Yeah,
Well, I haven't had access to it.
okay.
I'm just thinking broadly
Forward.
about how useful it would be. So maybe.
Yeah, I think it's an
something-
interesting conversation about the employment history. I'd like to talk
Yeah.
more about that.
Well, one of the things that in New York City, for instance, I pull up the app, the Alumni app,
Yeah,
which pulls out the banner.
Yeah.
Had previously at least, but that has employment information and it has,
Oh, right in the app.
it does, yeah, which is amazing. It actually has 2 addresses for every alumni, their place of employment and their home. And so you can go to, financial district and see like the banks with 35 Colby alumni and things like that. So it's super useful to be able to show that off.
So really, we sort of already have access.
We sort of already have that, yeah, so I will definitely continue to use that. But I'm just thinking the ability to sync a kid up with an alumni who is studied their same major, maybe it was a slightly, offbeat major.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
is
And so
doing
one of the things
internships.
is we will not be matching interviews. The
Yeah.
alums will also be self-selecting interviews. We can choose which information about the applicants they see. So it may be a good addition to put in intended area of interest or something like that, so that when they're viewing the students in their EPS that have requested interviews.
Or maybe it's information we ask for in the renewal process and we don't even have to go through research. I'm just thinking about more robust ways to use the AAP, because we've always talked about expanding AAP and things like that. I'm not saying now, let's do this, this is amazing what we have.
sure.
Just brainstorming for like,
And
there's so
with the
much we
structure
could
here,
do.
to add a couple extra fields is easy, right?
Exactly, in like simple fields, not
And
like.
I think that's a great point. So as you're meeting with your your AP volunteers over the course of the fall, I say this with hopefully I don't put my foot in my mouth, but ask them what their interests are, particularly young alums, that, they're not able to or not ready to start a giving history with us, but see which ways they'd like to interact and help the office. It may be more than just college fairs and interviews, which would be great. So.
Can we append them to events? Like, put them as attendees in
No, so.
receptions?
No. An event can only be scoped to one data set.
Yeah.
So that's why we have a separate event for guidance counselors, separate event structure for independent counselors, things like that. If we were to register them for an open house,
Yeah.
they would go as an inquiry and all that stuff.
They would be listed under the coverage though. Like they'll be linked to the event as having covered it.
They will. It wouldn't show up on like a registration list, but you will be able to see in the event which alums are related to that event, and I'll show you how that will look. But they wouldn't be attendees. You wouldn't count as a guest count or anything like that.
Would there be a way to pull a report or maybe on an alum profile to see what events they've attended in the past?
Yes, so that actually does happen.
Nice, okay,
Oh, yes, we can keep tabs on them.
nice.
That
How
actually
active,
does
and active they
happen.
are.
Beautiful.
Yes.
I believe, and we'll try it, when they join an event, it shows up on their dashboard.
Cool.
So we'll give that a shot.
We got something.
Okay.
And Dan, if we are hoping to have an alum with us at a fair, is that something we would also do through Slate, that we'd add it, or we'd be individually emailing?
No, so if you're talking like if you.
Like if I'm going to the
corresponding-
fair, but I would also like to have alumni support.
Sure. Yeah, so that would not populate in the portal automatically, because you would be the user. Remember, user one is always the person that's going. However, if you were to reach out separately, you could recruit someone to join you, or your operations partner could recruit someone to join you, add them as a related record, that would show up on their history and things like that.
Okay.
But
But the recruitment piece would be over email.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. The idea here is really to work on the majority, to help that become more self-service. But I like the idea. I think, so certainly we want to keep track of that. But it wouldn't be something that would populate because it does require
Sure.
that user one to be alive. So let me go back to.
How many tabs do you have open?
The other piece, prior to an alum gaining access to the portal, they will need to fill out a form that's basically a participation/confidentiality agreement type thing. And that will not let them any further than that screen until they use it. So that's going to be a way for us to sort of check in and see who really is active. We'll be able to check who hasn't submitted that form in a couple of years and roll it out and things like that. So just another checking process. This will be more robust in terms of, like, as we've talked about, welcome text and some instructional stuff, and ideally on the right-hand side, who their admission, who their AO is, who their operation partner is, things like that. I have just not gotten a chance to do that yet. The most important thing is what they'll see here and on the events tab. Because Claudia isn't truly, in this instance, like assigned anywhere just yet, what she will have is at the top, it will show any interviews that they have self-selected for, that they've agreed to participate in. I'll kind of explain what that will look like. And then it will also have any events that they've agreed to participate in, so those will be right at the top. Right below that, this part will say, this first block is actually going to be students who have requested an interview. And it will display all of those students. The way that that will get populated is the same way that we've done that in the past. So by adding an alumni interview request interaction, that is what's going to pull in that population of students to display here. When that does, there will be students' name, high school, city, state, distance from the alum's address. So it will look at the student's current address and show how many miles away that person is from the alumni who's logged in. And then there's basically a drop-down that will allow them to select that person as someone that they're going to interview. So that's how they will identify that person. And then we will ask them to fill out a brief form afterwards. We have to decide what's going to go on that. And then once that gets submitted, that pulls this person off of the list as far as who needs to be interviewed, sort of completes the process. Yeah.
So what sort of checks and balances and systems do you have in place for, say, someone lives in Kansas, someplace without a very dense population where we likely do not have volunteers and they request an alumni interview? Is that where we just go to the virtual interview and have them pull in through that? Or like, is there an action step that we need to take in order to let them know?
Yeah, we'll need to look at that, right? So, yeah, because right now the computer's only as good as it matching, right? So, so we'll want to keep an eye on that, and I'm not sure what that will look like just yet. But that will definitely be something we'll want to consider.
I don't know what the details it will look like, but I would imagine it's not very far away from the process of right now when someone calls and says they want to do an interview, and then we check and see if there's an AAP member in their area.
Yeah.
Because the operations team still needs to put in the interaction of an interview is requested. We won't let them request an interview if there aren't AAP in their area to do it.
So, yeah, that's good.
And then they would automatically be able to be eligible for the virtual interview.
We can change that.
Aspect.
Yeah. Let's do that.
That was so easy.
Yeah. And then below this first block will actually just show any applicant from the same EPS that the alum is in. It will not have contact information, so this will only be query only, name, school, things like that. We will decide at which point it makes sense to put decision information in here, if at all. Again, it will only though display for those students in their EPS area, not previous committees and things like that. So that's something that I can anticipate the AO's getting questions about, or the operations team getting questions about. How come last year I could see everyone from my club code, and this year I can only see people, in my EPS. They don't even know what EPS is, so hold on to that. But those will be just things that we'll need to manage as we go. I think it's going to be a minority of people, but they will be vocal, so.
Yeah, and we'll include in our communication of like, ED decisions, we're just,
It's a big font.
release.
There's two of them.
We'll include language in there of like, please reach out to your regional who will be signed on that email, because it will come from you through Deliver, that you'll be available to like take a phone call from them if they have questions. So we'll remind you in staff meetings as they're coming up AOs that like, you can expect some calls and take time and schedule them, but you can walk
Yeah,
through stuff.
and certainly, whether or not we decide to show a decision will not be displayed until after the decisions have been released to the students. So, the events piece will look something like this. For our friend Claudia, obviously she lives in an area that we recruit very heavily. So they will see the date, the time, which event it is, and location. And they'll have the opportunity, let me make sure I'm clicking on the right one. So this is Cheshire, 9/11. So they'll be able to choose join.
Are you impersonating right now?
I am impersonating, yeah.
Seriously.
We just sent her an email, we said thanks for covering.
I know, you're gonna get a phone call. What?
So once they click join, that shows up on their event assignments. And then if we go into some tab that I
You're probably gonna show this, but can they unjoin?
No. Remember we talked about that.
I couldn't remember where I could.
Yeah, so there used to, in the out of the box functionality, there was an unjoin button that would allow them to just say, oh, I changed my mind. We would never be notified of that or anything, so if they are changing their mind, they're going to need to let us know, let the operations person know. We want to be self-service, but we don't want to be that self-service.
It's like the day before when the box is already on your doorstep at the college fair.
Yeah.
Because they would click on join the college fair.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is,
Can you repeat the question?
yeah, Carly's question was, is there a specific number of alums that can volunteer for an event? That's a great question, and one I forgot to mention. Right now it's set up to show any college fairs that have less than 2 alums registered. So we will always welcome 2 people. We never need, or in some places can't have more than 2. So what will happen is they will only see in the possible events records that have more than 2, or excuse me, less than 2 people registered, meaning that there's still space. Once we have 2 alum records related to it, that will pop off of the list. If one cancels and we remove it, it'll go back on, sort of that sort of setup.
And will they not be able to see that someone else is already doing it too?
They will be able to see, I don't know if I have it in this particular instance, I don't, but there will be another field right at the bottom here that just says current coverage or something like that, and they'll be able to see, actually now that Claudia's doing it, we might be able to find some. Does anybody know of another AAP that's somewhere near Cheshire?
Barry
Barry
Feldman, Johnny Feldman.
So
Feldman. Yeah, Feldman, you're good.
So now that Claudia has joined the Cheshire Fair, we do see her as the related record. That happens automatically. That's what we'll query off of. That's what our coverage queries that the operations team will use will be based off of. I do need to build some filters and things like that, so those are not out there yet. But ideally what you would have is a query that shows any upcoming alumni college fair where there is either no coverage or less than 1 or anything like that. And then if we go to Claudia, you'll see on her homepage that she now has the event listed over here, so that will retain on her history, everything like that, then there is, someone's covering it.
Does that add them into the note sections too?
It does not add them into the note section, so that step will still,
Do they still need to be in the notes?
yeah, no, I guess not, right? So the piece with the notes that's helpful is the piece where you put the zip code in and it generates an EPS for that event. That's something that we'll query off of for reporting. We will want to know how many college fairs a particular EPS is. So, and again, you don't need to remember all of these steps. Like we'll have certainly notes and everything once we're in a final place for this, but I really don't, I guess I don't really see the need for putting that in, except for the fact that, we need to know who we're sending the materials to. I think that's something, so as Sam mentioned in the training that we did the operations team, you would always put the person that we would send the materials to as alumni representative number 1.
And
Maybe
actually,
we change that field to material person or primary alum or something like that.
and also right now, those fields are used to send the email for the college fair summary.
Yep, that's true,
So we would
yeah.
have to think about, is that still the best way
Right.
to communicate that out?
Yeah, exactly. So we will think about those things. I don't know, let me go back on this, and who was our other friend?
Yeah. The LOE. Yeah. Franklin. 2 ends.
So let's go, so here's the Cheshire Fair. Now we only have 1 person signed up for that, so that makes sense that that's still showing here. I guess I just haven't added that field yet, but when he clicks this, he'll be able to see, other person covering it would see Claudia's name
Nobody
for-
can pick and choose on what they cover.
Yeah. Makes sense. They do it. Well, maybe, well, I mean, you know, we actually talked about
Who has
this.
really catty relationships with one another.
Yeah.
I'll become a
Some
fan.
people may be more willing to help if they know that there's backup, right? If they know that there's someone else there.
I do think that's true.
So we may actually have better luck that way. I know. We're going to just for the sake of.
But we only need one. We would like two.
No, we need the right one.
So I just added a
Tony
second.
Tiger.
Tony Tiger.
Tony's in my region.
Yeah.
Wait, is that his actual name?
No, it's
He's a
Oh, I got really excited that we had to name it. Tony Tiger.
Friends with Coco Chris.
My first boss was named King King.
So now that we've added 2 alums to that event, obviously in Frank's account, he no longer sees the Cheshire Fair because that is filled to capacity. So that's where we're at right now. The events piece is fairly close to being ready to go. You know, we'll need to jazz up the portal a little bit more. I need to do some work. One of the areas that we were having trouble when we were assigning multiple EPS to particular alums, where there were some regions where Jenny had one of those EPSs and maybe Emily had the other one, and it didn't know what to do with that. So now that it's a one-to-one, we can build in territories. So basically each alum will have a regional AO assigned, like I said, in regions. So we will do some more jazzing up. As far as next steps for upcoming fairs, I forget, I know you've told me 100 times, which ones are more
Yeah,
immediate.
so I think what we're planning on, and it all depends on when we feel like the Slate portal's ready to share. Right now, I'm still living in a September 1 world. I don't know if you can tell me if that's unrealistic or not. Every day, we'll see.
I'm hoping.
Well,
Yeah. I would
but
like it to be August 17th.
Exactly, but we do know that we need to do the video, like even if the portal's ready, like before we can launch it, we need to do some training videos, we need to make sure we're all on board and that the appropriate training's been done on the staff before we let anything to the AAP volunteers. We want to make sure that we're giving the alums at least 4 weeks' notice on college fairs. So beginning next week, and as Jenny mentioned, there's going to be a lot of action steps related to the AAP next week. We are right now planning on, I booked some time with Drew to get the first communication out to alums on Tuesday, which would basically be, this is our new structure, here's some cool, great things going on at Colgate, stay tuned, we'll be sharing information about our new alumni portal, and by maybe next week we can give them an estimation of timeline. With that said, we do want to give heads up to regions that have college fairs coming out in the earlier part of September. So we will be working on that more on a hand management system. Emily and I have been managing the college fairs. Emily's going to take a lead on some of that individual communication. Half of them actually are in Emily's region, which is why it happens naturally. But I think there's a couple in Georgia, but they tend to be grouped by geography based on what's early. So there's probably going to be 4 or 5 alumni groups that we need to reach out to individually before the portal is set to let them know of upcoming events. If we wait until September 1st and then we need coverage on September 12th, we're gonna just create a reason for fussiness. So we'll manage that next week.
And
I think
now
it's
that,
about 15 to 18 fairs that fall before September 20th.
You're gonna get emails from me saying, hey, you need to reach out to your AAP members about the following fairs.
Yeah.
and like I said, they're in there. I will have better instructions on how to query that group. I just need to build like some EPS filters and things like that. But basically what it would be is we could do theoretically a mileage filter or an EPS filter, so you can query the alumni database for people in a particular region.
So the 2 things that I see, just to summarize, is that the few things that I think are just going to be conversation points is, one, it's an online platform that I think will work exceedingly well for most people under the age of 40. Probably 50 actually, but there are going to be some alums that this platform is just going to be a challenge for. The need for a chairperson, as you can see, it's self-service, has actually been holistically changed. So I think over the course of the next year, we will be evaluating whether or not we actually need the title of chairperson. Dan actually also said from that meeting with the alumni that there's really like no additional value in terms of alumni volunteerism to be a chair over a volunteer. And also that they weren't really looking at their contacts and a variety of other things, so
Yeah, it was kind of interesting.
it was great.
They don't care that they help us.
Pretty much, they're not giving money, basically.
Exactly, yeah.
They're not giving money, so I see that, and also the college fairs, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but the college fairs that will be displayed for them to have access to will be in a 50-mile radius, but the interviews will be only within their
That's
EPS region.
Mhm.
So you're going to have someone seeing college fairs for this big area. In places of the Northeast, it's gonna cross a lot of boundaries. But this does make sense for regions of every place actually outside of the Northeast where we call upon our alums to do things in an hour radius of where they live. But that is gonna be confusing in the fact that they're seeing alumni, they're seeing volunteer, college fairs and this whole big range, and then they're basically going to see interviews that are defined by EPS codes, but they don't actually even know what an EPS code is. And if you look at an EPS code map, it's odd delineations of how it breaks up a state. So there can very well be some confusion that will come out because they'll say, well, I want to interview this kid from Milton. He said he requested an interview and I don't see him as available to interview because he may fall outside, going back to Milton, may fall outside of that region. It's also going to be dependent upon what students have as their active address.
That's correct, yeah. So all of the address filtering that happens is based on their active address. We do that to ideally capture those students at boarding school where they're at. So most students, as we saw last year, do a pretty good job, and the Common App and Coalition App have actually done better with how they request address information. So they do actually ask for address, basically where you are right now and your home address. Slate, as we know, prioritizes that right now address, the mailing address. So theoretically, the interviewee will be able to get an interviewer within 25, 50 miles, whatever that EPS range is, to where they currently are. But again, that does require that the student has put in the address correctly and things like that. So there may be a case where a student put their home address for both and is at boarding school and would show up as a possible interviewee in an entirely different state. We will need to manage those, but it's crazy as far as like artificial intelligence has come that like we still can't. The computer only is as good as things matching up.
But the great thing is the service we can apply to the alums. If we send communication to them, if we send emails, if we're verifying, there's going to be information in their timeline, there will be notes on when we're shipping boxes, if there's any email communication, it can be right from the alum's record. There's going to be a lot of really great information. We've also decided that, again, I'm looking to you to make sure this is accurate, but we've also decided that we're using the admission email account holistically for any communication. A lot of the deliver communication may come regionally, but we did send a lot of things previously from an AAP email address that was separate, that was a separate email box that needed to be managed, and everything will be coming out of the admission at colgate.edu, or it will come from a regional AO or operations team member. So we're just trying, again, making it a much more general process that anyone can provide service to an alum at any point regarding their programming.
I guess this is sort of a niche question, but like for Lynn and I, or for like Emily and Gary, where the way schools are split up aren't necessarily like based on EPS, how is that gonna work? Is it gonna say like Lynn and Teresa and Alex and Angela?
It will be based on, so each of you only, so there's exclusions in those areas. That's a good question. I don't
Well,
know.
Gary's technically assigned to EPS codes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
every user is assigned to EPS codes, and I think they're handled, so the way that the staff assignments happen is in a priority rule. So all of you guys that have exception areas, basically your rule runs before everyone else's. So I think there still is a one-to-one in the EPS regions that you cover. So what we'll do when we're setting up the staff assignments is,
Yeah, because Alex and I we're the same EPS codes, but there's a layer by school.
yeah.
I think that's the only one though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because Gary technically
has
is
San
assigned
Francisco.
to, even though he really only covers certain schools, he's assigned to San Francisco and
Yeah.
LA.
Yeah.
Are you guys sharing public and
Yeah.
privates in Boston?
Yeah.
Okay, and my other question, and I don't know, maybe this won't be an issue, I'm just thinking if I were an AP member, this would be an issue. Is there any concern that these interviews in particular are gonna show up on this portal, but because they're not getting like an email nudging them to log in, that they're not gonna check?
Then we just turn them inactive, quit them from the
No, but so the message will, so there's no alert out to committee members that there's a new event. Or a
Correct.
new.
Yes.
Yeah.
You snooze, you lose.
Well, part of it, I think, is also going to be some of the checks that the AO and AAA team are gonna do when they're checking to see, like, are there college fairs going to be covered, are there interviews going to be assigned? And I think in the beginning part, it's gonna get the alums to feel comfortable logging into Slate and like having them adapt to the new rhythm of like how they need to start doing things. It might take some more like hand-holding at the beginning, but hopefully we can get them to a place where they'll like check. Or at least we'll remind them to check.
There's gonna be certain areas that'll need lots of prodding,
Yeah.
even in the old way, new way, just like Lynn said, the older people, I can tell you probably already who's gonna squawk the most.
Yeah.
They do cover fairs, but they're not gonna sign into the portal.
Right.
That was a question I had actually. So say like some alum who's done the same fair every year because they love that and whatever, and they call and they're like, I wanna do this, just sign me up for this, I'm gonna do this. If they've never logged in and done that whole privacy check, I'm gonna do this, can I still assign them to
You
something?
can, correct, yep, so the privacy piece, like,
It'll still exist.
Can we read them the?
yeah, well, just like we.
I know,
Yeah.
okay, hold on, I just read you something, sir.
You understand and.
I can still like.
We can, as administrators, still go in and assign people, so that's like what I just did here, so you would go right to the event, click on edit, and then it's this related record piece here.
Okay, so they can still be active
You
even if they
can
haven't
do,
actually logged in.
yeah,
I think we're gonna start to get comfy with logging into the portal once they know that, if we decide to do this, once they know, like, if we decide to release decisions on the portal, that's when they'll probably wanna actually log in to see.
I will say I think that probably nobody will log in without somebody telling them you should log in now.
Yeah, it's not like, it's gonna be
That's
like,
my thought.
like every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, let me log into the portal.
Right, I think,
Maybe we should set up a deliberate
In my own life.
communication.
well, that's what I was just thinking, I wonder if we could do a deliberate
Like
communication
around weekly or something.
and query off of event or interview in your area and set it up to run.
yeah. I hope so, I can't make any promises as far as.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've hoped it.
Configurable joins.
10 different things before,
Um,
and it hasn't.
Here, you can write
But-
it.
Like, don't push it, guys, we
Yeah,
got
there
this
are.
far.
Please log in, they're not,
Else.
thank you for logging in.
So how many, I could query this, but do you guys, how many alumni interviews did we even complete last year?
We don't know if they completed it unless it's.
Well, Sure. But how many requests,
I
like
can
how?
tell you how many were requested.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if in the process of doing this, we actually knew, because it's not an incredibly overwhelming number. So, I mean, it could just be, I mean, and I think you guys all know that Alexandra is managing just travel team stuff. I mean, we could maybe just come up, some of the emails that we're talking about is a set deliver with individual people in communication, but we could probably even just do a general query weekly or on a set schedule of interviews that are yet to be assigned, and then as we monitor what that is, figure out what the appropriate can be. I think there's ways around it, we're just,
Yeah.
the great news is interviews don't pick up for a long time.
We had 200.
200.
Okay.
That's more than I thought, actually.
Yeah, me too.
But that's just
But those
requested,
are
right?
requested.
So a lot of them will change their mind too,
Yeah.
and that's the other thing, if we never knew, any of us took one, we would always tell them up front, these are not evaluative, you know, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
Half the time the student would say, never mind, not gonna bother.
And you can still have that conversation and just not put the interaction in if they, now granted, they may change their mind the next day and we'll never know, and they're gonna live in La La Land, so.
So if somebody signs up, so say Tony Tiger wants an interview, and he appears on somebody's portal, and so,
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that was that.
too easy, it was just sitting right there for anybody.
too easy. And then Frank Lohman signs up to say, I'll interview Tony Tiger.
What happens then?
What happens then?
There is I believe, a field that gets populated on Tony's record, the student's record, that says Frank Lohman is the related record that is the interviewer. So, but there's nothing like the interview happened on this date, or an interview event does not get created.
But do we, like, is there a pop-up to the alum that tells them to contact the student with information? Like, do they have the student's contact information? Like, how does it actually become an interview?
Yeah,
Is that just a communication we develop?
right, so they choose the student. They'll have, I think on the interview piece,
Just wondering, do they get a pop-up with like lightning bolts that say, contact him now?
so yeah, so they do get email, phone number, all of that information when they click on the name. So they'll click on it and say, I'm interviewing this person or whatever. And then they can still click on that name anytime they want to, because it'll be in their my interviews area. They can click on it and see phone number, email, things like that. But we'll need to tell them that it's up to them to reach out
Right.
and create.
Like if you select this person, then contact them.
Right, yeah, if you're selecting someone to interview, you are then going to follow up with them and reach out. There's nothing automated.
Okay.
Then there is a report that we will have that will, after the interview has happened, they'll click back into that and just fill out maybe we put a date on there, I did the interview this date, we completed it, whatever, and then that takes that person out things.
Okay.
So should we be changing our mind, like, how we communicate interviews? So if we get an interview now, where in the past we've said, here's the chairperson, or, we're in contact, we kind of put the ball in their court.
Right.
So should we now be just explaining the whole thing? Do you really want this? We'll take your request, someone will contact you.
Yes, yep.
So if they say, no, we're not gonna do any interaction because we don't want people contacting them. Yes. So we have to make it more clear, do you want it or you don't?
Yes, exactly, yep.
And I think in general, we want to really try to push more interviews. There's no downside, well, I guess if it's a bad match, but we really want to, I know they're optional and I know they're informational, but we do want to.
It is a good touch point.
It is a good touch point, and we want to try to encourage that when possible.
It's almost like, I will add you to the list, if you don't want this, tell me.
Exactly. I think sometimes if they call to request an interview, you can, say, yes, we do have alumni interviews available. They are informational, but they are available for you. Are you interested in an informational interview? And if they say yes, then you
Take the action, the interaction, and let them know that, okay, that means someone will be reaching out to you. Like,
Right.
you are
And
now
you'll
on
be
the
scheduling this.
list.
And I kind of,
That is a question, like, if it's an email.
I think we need to be proactive and excited about the interview. And yes, this is a great opportunity to meet with an alum. Because we are developing more of the virtual interviews, so if we do have an alum not sign up for that, it's not like we're setting them up like, that'll be part of the maintenance. If we don't have someone who's signed up for an alum and it's been 2.5 weeks, then maybe we assign them to a virtual interview. And we have one of our fellow interns do it. So,
If that sort of initial question about the interview comes by email, would we want our default to be like, yes, adding the tag on them, or waiting to hear back from them with like a confirmative, like, yes, I want this?
I think I would actually reach back out and say, okay, here's what it's about, do you want me to,
Okay.
I think I would want
So
that
yeah,
second
until
layer
they
of,
get that.
yeah.
Sometimes they don't know what they're asking for.
Yep.
They just are calling because they just got called for an alumni interview at an Ivy League and they know they applied to Colgate. So I think clarifying our process and making it very clear that we would love to do this for you, but please confirm you're interested in an alumni interview before I set that up.
Okay.
You know? And sometimes it's good too to give them an action step. If you'd like to have this interview completed within the next month, I'll need to hear from you by Friday. You know? Sometimes the open-endedness is
Yeah.
why we like never close the loop is, and you don't want to make it an urgent thing, but I think you can say, you know, it may take a few weeks to set up, let you know by Friday if you'd like to have an interview during the month of September. Because then if they don't get back to you and then they complain in October, you have a reference point to go back to because it'll be in their timeline.
And so all I have to do is add this alumni interview request interaction. Move on with the day.
And forget about it, over all the other steps.
Yeah.
So should we move we always said it was good if it completed by the end of January, but if it's maybe gonna take a little longer, should we have more of an earlier deadline, have interactions logged in? I would kind of stop giving them out a week before the 31st, just because it took at least a week, but now if we're counting on the alums
I guess
signing it.
why do we
sending
have a
out-
deadline if it's not evaluative? Like, if we're yielding this, we're trying to yield the student all the way through May.
The only reason we don't is because of rolling ED2.
And keep going with that.
But managing, and again, like if this is more internal, we can likely manage it better. But we would put in a request out to an alum. They would contact the student. We didn't have control over the timeline back and forth. Meanwhile,
Then
the
we get that
student
denied.
converted ED2 and we denied them and then the alum finally called. So it was because of the only piece there was because of the rolling ED2. Just the lack of sort of control on our part.
Yeah.
But now that it's an internal system and we know the status of the applicant, we can think about, is there a way for us to
Right.
protect against that
Yeah.
happening? When it was in the hands of the alums to contact the student and we didn't.
And it sort of still is, like they still need to reach out and set the appointment, which they can do for 3 weeks out.
But I think we would also be able to check and say the student converted to ED2. We should check in with the alum, you know what I mean?
I think let's leave it as it for now, but I think that's a good conversation. I think we
Yeah.
should definitely.
One other small piece that I wanted to say to staff, as you're meeting with alumni, switching gears a little bit, as you're meeting with alumni when you're on the road, please, like, if you're meeting with a cool alum who has a cool story, make a note of it and let the communications team know. Like, we stumbled upon an amazing, like, international alum who lives in Connecticut last year, because they had reached out to me in the AAP thing, and now Dibs is in, like, all of our brochures. And it's like, and we sent his email out to all international admits who weren't Chinese. And we don't really know those stories unless we collect the anecdotes. So if you find cool anecdotes, my lens is with the international alums, but with any alums, like, we want to be able to brag about them per our swag. Swag factors, just, it's also a good thing to keep in mind as you're meeting alumni.
I do want to highlight one more alumni-related piece that's not specific to AAP, and we got notes forthcoming on this. Well, no, just kill me till November.
Apparently I'm down.
There's a new alumni connection form. Yay.
I am too.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Sorry that I doubted you for
We should clap.
Are we good?
Are there any other questions about?
No, it is, but I'm still.
Forward that to Jenny.
Were you gonna mention something about LPR?
I was, but that really doesn't, we don't really need to do that until the application's
Gary will start getting them in September.
LPR, yeah.
I know,
Just FYI.
Yeah.
It's not just, it's not application. it'll be before that.
I know. Got it. Yeah, for our.
Okay, I do. So if we're taking the request
Mm-hmm.
and we're just logging in, if we don't have an alum for that EPS code, it just sits there until we run a query and go in and do it that way, or
So if a student requests an interview, the first.
I think our to-do list is so long
I
right
didn't
now.
understand, I didn't understand when you were
Yeah.
talking about it before.
So right now, as it currently stands, if a student currently requests an interview, the first check is there someone in that area who can do that, right? Like as an operations team, like you look and see like, is there an AAP person in that area, period?
Okay, so when we're on the phone with someone, we're not just logging it, there's research like we did before to figure that out.
Yes.
Okay,
We still need to make sure that someone's there to do the interview.
okay,
And then if there is not an AAP member there, then you can offer them to do a virtual interview. Which the release date's like August 20th.
The release date for the
Virtual.
oh, they haven't started yet?
No.
Okay. That's what I was gonna ask. I was gonna say, how is that process going?
I got an email, Brittany emailed us last night, and it's like, I think August 20th is the new date. Which doesn't really matter in the alumni world, because they don't start their interviews until September 1st anyway. But the first check is to make sure, is there someone there who can do the interview, if not the virtual step.
okay, okay. So I wanted to clarify, there was a step before we're just doing logging that interaction.
Yeah, so you check if someone's there, and then you make sure that they know that it's informational and do you actually want me to set this up for you? And then if those two things happen, then you set up the interaction. Yep. And does all like the AO staff know about virtual interviews?
I had a,
Alright.
I don't know. Let's talk about virtual.
We'll talk about that.
I think it was a mini international team idea.
Yes.
My intent is during our next staff meeting to put that on the schedule to discuss, just get everyone on the same page about that and also show what it looks like.
Do you want to give a quick overview now, just because like the operations team won't be.
Yeah, certainly. So yeah, as Jenny was saying, we're offering the option for a virtual interview, and a lot of our hope is that this can get to students that A, again, can't get to campus, B, don't have access to AAP. I've been working a lot with Dan, and we were able to get it so that students can sign up for these virtual interviews through Slate and also conduct the interviews through Slate as well, through its video service. The current interns that we have giving interviews have all been told they're doing it, we've all done an etiquette training for video etiquette, and right now we're just working to get all of them signed off so that they're ready to go. We currently have 2 of them signed off, so that if everything comes out next week, we have someone for the time slots. We're offering 2 time slots each day, an 8:15 to 8:45 and a 4:15 to 4:45, in hopes that we can accommodate for time zones and things like that if we have any students coming from other places where maybe the times don't work out exactly if we do them somewhere else. So, and that, I know the website, we have a sense of when that's going to go up, since I will send it to Alex maybe.
Alex just a note. Oh, no, no,
Alex
just.
is
Typing.
No, Jane, Alex.
Because I'm kind of.
Maybe you're gonna ask, so she.
Alex.
What?
website language for virtual interviews.
Well, I was wondering, do we know what the timeline is for that going up, since we sent it through?
I think it's up now.
It's up now.
Pretty sure.
It may be up now, but registration is open as well, so students can go in and register for the time slots already.
So the goal of virtual interviews is just to, as Brittany said, reach students, because even though our interviews are informational, we know they are a really, really good yield tool and make them feel connected to Colgate. So we, when it's actually rolled out, we'll talk with make sure the operations team feels comfortable on how you're managing the registrations for the interviews. So of course, only high school seniors can do it.
Are they going to call in and we're going to register them, or they're just going to register themselves?
Yeah,
I
it's
think
just
they
like,
register themselves.
there's time slots, just
But
like
then
regular.
there's like, we'll talk more before it gets rolled out to make sure that there's a check before the interviews happen, after they register, to make sure that A, it's a senior who registered, and B, like, it's not like Joe Schmo from New Jersey who just did, like, coming up to campus. It's like Susie
Tony
Q.
Steiger.
Yeah, I think our hope
Yeah.
at the moment, we wanted to have it first and foremost out so we can start to see what kind of, how many students are actually going to be looking into this option, how many students are going to be using it.
Yeah.
And then at that point, then we can start to evaluate, are students frequently applying for this who are not applicable for this, how should we do the screening process?
So it's up right now, it's on the international students page of the website only.
It says 4:15 a.m.
They won't in about 5 minutes.
Okay.
We are doing 4:15 a.m. interviews. You have to be on the desk.
Yes, we're
Dan,
I'll send you my paycheck once, okay.
So, do we need to, can we add a
4 a.m.
time zone label to that?
Yeah.
It doesn't show though.
No, mine just says 4:15 a.m.
Can someone, I'm being an idiot.
International
International
I
students.
don't actually, I don't actually know because
We
we
should put
can't put like 4:15, I can put it in like the description.
I think it actually will display the
It does
students' time
display,
zone.
yeah. If it's, if we're, because we're in the time zone, I think it's doing that, but I think
Okay,
we're.
perhaps on the.
Otherwise, you can add an additional in the description.
I can check it out for a second.
One more thing to do.
Oh, it's just down further.
And this one I'm
Yeah.
I mean, so there's more to come on this, but I wanted to throw that out there. That it's in the works.
So many questions.
That's fine.
I just lost in that.
So can we just get here from like the scheduler for interviews?
It's in the scheduler, yeah, and that's actually how they will be conducted. You can go through the scheduler in order to connect to the
It's a
video.
template.
Oh,
If you actually click to register, then it does specify that it's Eastern time, Eastern time.
Oh, good, yeah.
Great. Well, good thing I'm not registering you, because good thing I'm not on the front line.
Yeah.
Good thing I'm not on that version.
Yeah, me
Hold on one second.
Okay, I was.
If I didn't get a response, I would.
Brittany, can you help? I can't figure this out.
I feel like that's what I always,
Okay, so I got
do
you.
it kind of people like that. What if the last one thing that comes over there again?
Like,
See, interviews?
Yeah, like, I did that.
Oh, yeah.
So like, here I am, I'm in the scheduler. So here are the interviews. And so like, but there's not like a little thing. for, like,
Online virtual interviews.
Yeah, if you click on
And there's a little
interviews.
hyperlink for it.
Yeah, on the right-hand side, it should be a filter.
See, I was looking for V for virtual, but it was under O for online.
Online.
Virtual. Inconsistent languaging.
I was like, I couldn't find it.
Virtual interviews, I searched in here, it doesn't come up, it's online.
Virtually and then.
This is overnight. I overnight visit.
It's essentially what
happens.
Pretty much
Don't
interviews.
show up.
Eh,
Like, if we're just in.
almost there.
Not ready.
So in other words, just
When I
going in
go
that way,
to
they'll
look
click on it.
See what is.
They do, because they start on the 20th. Yeah, see, you did what I did, you didn't scroll far enough. Okay.
Scroll. You know, we look at heat maps of websites, like 90% of people don't scroll past the first banner. So if you ever make a website, you want people to see something, it's not on the top, this is not going to.
So, Jameer, when you asked the question like an hour ago about meeting with alumni, I actually think we need to be very ready to do walkthroughs of the alumni portal with them, like if we're meeting with people for dinner. Doesn't mean you need like a tech display, but we should be walking through the value of the portal and also encouraging them to have the app. You know, they're gonna need the app. I mean, very seldom are they gonna be sitting at a desktop ready to log into the Slate piece. So yet another reason to try to have that face-to-face interaction, but
Sorry, you just lost me. We mean the alumni?
alumni. No,
No,
the alumni
Slate
having
app.
a Slate app, well, they won't have access to a Slate app? They can't log in through a
They're
Slate
not
app?
users, no.
Ah, so they have to be like.
I mean, they can go
in a browser?
to ColgateAlumniPortal.com.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't tell them to
Yeah,
download
don't tell them
Slate.
that.
I just assumed since they were like
Yeah,
people
yeah.
that they could.
Yeah, so just like a student, like.
That's true, they won't.
would-
Okay, so it's not quite that easy, but still, we can benefit from walking through, even though they have training videos, we can help them understand how to eat the ease and access. So that might be another interest they would have of meeting with us, more so than just meeting with us. But the functional use of how do I use this new system. And now we know about online virtual interviews too. Who knew? Who knew? Now we know.
And for your meetings, you guys, in terms of budget, I think that if you try to shoot for something in your meeting, depending on how many people you're meeting, no more than like $75 or $100. Obviously, you can't control if like 15 people show up and you need to order food for them.
You're talking about with alumni?
Yeah.
Okay.
They won't, there's like,
Let me be clear, I'm talking about virtually.
No. But like if you're, so like my rule of thumb is that if I'm like having dinner, I would usually have dinner with like 2 alums, maybe 3 other alums, and we would complete a foursome, but then my internal cap would be like $25 a head for dinner, including tax and tip and stuff.
That's, yeah, that's rough.
Depending on where you go. Yeah.
In New Orleans, it goes a long way.
But like if I'm.
It does go a lot right.
But like if I'm
Yeah.
in Long Island, so you're going to.
So then maybe it's like if there's 2 alums and you, then dinner seems appropriate, but if it's more than that, then probably just like happy hour.
Yeah.
In New York, they can each have one small coffee and use your plate.
Yes.
Does that come out of travel budget? Like,
It does, because it's, I mean, technically, maybe no, but I build it in, when I build the travel budget, I build like an entertainment portion that goes to the big 259, whatever. So
Yeah.
it is part of travel planning. And I would go back to the fact that
We spend a lot of money traveling.
we spend a lot of money traveling, and I don't want to say just spend more money traveling, but we spend a lot of money traveling, and we are like a tiny piece of the continuum of how students learn about Colgate, and alumni, our reputation, all of those things significantly precede us. So our investment in making sure our alumni are representing us well, feeling good about the experience, positive about it, goes an incredibly long way. They'll be very excited to have a pen, so bring pens. Give everybody a pen.
And a new pennant if we have one.
Exactly. We are ordering new banners with a word mark as well, and I can already see that people who have the old banner without the new word mark are going to request the new banner with a new word mark. Ideally, we'll just phase those in over time. Everyone is not getting just a new banner, but we will phase them in with a new. But they do like swag too, so Stacy's working on new pennants. I actually showed people I like the new pennant. It's probably, I think the C looks better on that than it has most things.
Stacey's grinding her teeth.
Always live one at a time.
It does, I do think it looks better.
The pennant is fine.
The pennant looks okay.
Right?
Yeah.
No, that's right.
Yes.
Like staff members, let me look at
Oh, that's good. I didn't even think about new staff banners with the new word mark. Is that what?
Are they the
No, the alumni, we're out. We're out of the alumni ordering.
Because of the new one.
No, we are just out.
So it comes up on the calendar.
Yeah.
So we got 35 previous orders.
So it's lost in there.
I could feel it though, we probably do something with our staff.
What am I about to say?
I did not expect to inspire myself today.
All right, so that was the alumni interview portion. We're going to take a little break and regroup.